because of our tribalism, negative ethnicity, and having allowed, two communities to rule for the last 61 years or 62 years. The level of entitlement,
Araha,
the man eat man.
Sorry, Araha. I give you a minute to land your point. Then
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually going to sleep because what I'm hearing is a lot of hogwash from Kenyans, blaming this and that. When the whole issue is us, let us look ourselves in the mirror and see whether you're a Kenyan first, or you are a Luo first, or you're a Kikuyu. Because learn something from Tanzania, where all the presidents come from minorities, from Nyerere to Hassan Mwingi to wherever, to the current Suluhu. But here you cannot even allow a Turkana, a Somali, Amdigo to become president because of some stupid, primitive, archaic mentality that, we are the majority. Come on. Kenyans are still living in the Neanderthal, well, how is it pronounced? Neanderthal, whatever it's called, age. I'm sorry to say. Good night.
Thank you, Araha. Thank you. Weston, you had not landed your point. I'm gonna give you just 2 minutes or so to land your points. You dropped. Then I think we are looking at how to wind up. We were supposed to wind up by 10:30, but sometimes the conversation gets sweeter or so. And also, I wish to also tell the speakers on the panel, we'll give you time to give your final submissions as well. So Weston, I give you 2 minutes to land your point so that you.
Well, thanks, the real Joe. Joe, the just speaker was spoken and brings me to the point I wanted to raise vis-a-vis Migai about parliamentary system in a highly politically unstable system such as ours. Now, there's something called minority veto. When you read that scholar, he referenced Arend, this system called constitutionalism. What it means is that you have to give the El Molo, the Taraka, and those other minority ethnic groups in Kenya veto powers. What it means, if there is... Joe, can you still hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
You have to give those minority ethnic groups veto power, so that if you bring a bill or a motion in parliament, because they don't have the numbers and it's going to hurt the interest, they can veto it. Are we ready for that? We are not. When people say, oh, Kindiki Kidure comes from a community of, I don't know how many, 240,000 votes. So we're still disdainful to people because they don't come from the so-called populous communities, which, as it is, I agree with the previous speaker, that kind of politics is atavistic. It's extremely anachronistic. We shouldn't be entertaining it. So I putting it to the likes of Ekuru. When I talk about the politics of the day, the exigencies of the day trumping good intentions, as encapsulated under the rule of law and the Constitution, that's exactly what I mean. And therefore, Wendy, as I learned, it doesn't mean if somebody speaks English is detribalized, or French or Spanish. It doesn't mean that. We tend to think like that in Kenya. In fact, one of the ways of promoting social cohesion, I dare say, we have to even ensure that these local languages, indigenous languages, are studied from grade 0 up to tertiary. That is it. And that's why when Rigathi speaks in his mother tongue, in Nairobi, the heart of a cosmopolitan area, people become suspicious what his messaging is all about. But if people were to learn that language he's using, well, they wouldn't suspect that he's into some dog whistling politics. And that's why, of the presidents we have had to date, Jomo Kenyatta spoke in his mother tongue publicly. Daniel Moi did not for 24 years. You're not going to get any clip in which Daniel Moi spoke publicly in his mother tongue. Mwai Kibaki did it. Uhuru Kenyatta did it liberally. We're yet to see William Ruto. Why is it a problem? It's a problem because when you do that and you hold that office, apex office, it betrays lack of appreciation of ethnic sensibilities and how ethnicity has been instrumentalized to discriminate, to incorporate, to make people be consigned to the margins in spite of their qualifications and potentials. But if we were to talk about this, frame it in the Constitution, then we'll know how to go about it, how we can go about it in terms of scholarship, epistemically. How do we ensure that Kenyans become polyglots? They can speak as many languages as they can, and therefore we can understand one another. So Wendy, in South Africa, where people can speak as many languages and the Constitution affirms all the languages to be official, the country is not more ethnically divided than we are, who only speak in Swahili and English, because language is not the issue. It is the politics that is the issue. Bad politics just means that. You can't cure it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Weston. Thank you. And actually, I'm going to do the research. I'm going to look for evidence, and I bring evidence kwa kalatas, as we say it, about Moi speaking his language. I'm going to do that research. But yeah, we are winding up the space. I see Obed, your hand is up. I don't know what mistake I have committed, but let me.
You haven't. You've done an excellent job. I don't punish people. What I'm trying to do is, Dr. Ekuru had asked that we land at 10:30, or we close the space at 10:30, or I'd ask what time we close. Because Dr. this was your request and this was your space passé. How much longer can we stretch you so that we don't waste your time?
Actually, no. I think I need to go because I have to prepare for a trial tomorrow. I've got 2 hearings.
Okay.
So I may not stay longer. I just need to make my final comments, and then I think I can leave you guys to go on.
I think I would allow you that leverage because you've really been gracious to us. We would allow you to speak. Would you have let us allow Aukot to greet you before you make your final
Okay. Yes, obviously. Yeah, anytime. Let's listen to Obachi, Uncle Obachi.
Okay. Uncle Fred, you have a chance to us. Uncle Fred? I'm not so sure Uncle Fred can hear us. Can you hear us? Or is it me that can't hear him?
No, he's not talking. I can see his mic is on, but I don't think he's muted.
Uncle, you probably have to sort your mic issues and then
you can probably drop then come back.
Yeah, so we'll allow Daktari to give his final remarks, and then we can see how we round up the space.
Okay. First of all, let me just say, I mean, on a very light touch, Weston, you can't describe us as the likes of. That's a bit derogatory. I hope going forward, we are not the likes of. You can just say, I want to address Ekuru Aukot in that tone. Now, my final comments are these. The question of values in any society is also a question of leadership. I remember my days back in the UK as a student during Tony Blair's premiership. The health, I think the NHS, they call it, was so overstretched. And Tony Blair, I think, commissioned a study where he established that it was the bad eating habits of the British people not exercising that was actually overstretching the NHS. And he spoke about it as a leader, and he told them, listen, we need to change our lifestyles. Obesity was actually affecting the healthcare system. And so sometimes when we talk about values in a society, it's about the kind of leadership that we have. How is that leadership maybe moralizing, living the example of the kind of society that we want? So when you, for example, got positions under the Constitution of Kenya, how are you behaving yourself in the holding of that office? If you look at, for example, William Ruto's cabinet, the first one particularly, you had all manner of characters, appointed. People who were charged with murder, rape, very serious offenses, taking up office. But it's also about the Kenyan society. we don't really interrogate our leadership. You know, it looks like Kenyan leadership attracts the most deplorables. And therefore that becomes the definition of what kind of society that we are. You know, when I listen to many people, especially people like Western, you know, be so critical about the Kenyan society, I feel like someone like Western is speaking from a point of utopia, because we have perfected the art of lamentation, but we actually do nothing about it. You know, let me tell you, Western, I participated in the 2017 presidential election and also went round in the 2019 when I was promoting the Punguza Mizigo. I can tell you this for a fact. We can lament on these spaces. We can talk, call them names, so long as we don't offer ourselves to be the alternative leaders in this country. They don't really care. They love it that way, that we remain that way. We can criticize them. But the moment you go into their space, and this is exactly what we did at Third Way Alliance Kenya, when we promoted the Punguza Mizigo Constitution Amendment Bill, and we got 1.2 million signatures to promote that bill, it became a threat to BBI. And they came glaring. They even tried to take away our political party. So we can talk to each other. We can be curious onlookers. And I'll refer you to a very interesting passage by a guy called Bertolt Brecht, talking about the political illiterates. A lot of us here are political illiterates because we are just fence sitters. So I think we need to get involved in the governance of our country. And the moment we get involved, that's when these people will know. You see, the Gen Z movement, in a way, shook them. Actually, a friend of mine told me that in State House, guys were scared, especially when the Gen Zs were saying, we are storming that State House. I think Ruto and his team were thinking about Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Burkina Faso, that will this also happen to us? So again, I would say that. But to Western, I think you need to read Article 204 of the Constitution of Kenya. Equality is an ideal, but I think equity is the kind of attribute we're talking about here. Article 204 talks about equalization fund, and I think it is symbolically because of the nature and character of our leadership. That's why we crafted Article 130 of the Constitution of Kenya, because the character of our society is that we want to see one of our own in government. That's why you can see the fight between Gachagua and Ruto. What stopped Ruto from picking, say, for example, Aboni as a running mate, or somebody from Lamu or a Bajuni? He had to pick a Kikuyu because he knows that Kikuyu will bring a block vote that will make him the president. But he doesn't believe in that partnership. So that is just the character of our leader. We have to be realistic about what our society is all about. Lastly, I would say that the Constitution of Kenya 2010 is just but a piece of paper. It may not be what the paper is written on if we don't live it, if we don't breathe life to it. So it's up to us to live the Constitution. It's up to us to call for accountability. If you look at Article 3, it requests of all of us that we have the duty to respect, uphold, and protect the Constitution, protect the Constitution. So let's not leave it to the political class. By now, if you live in Kenya, even if you live outside but you are Kenyan, you ought to know that there is political conmanship going on. Politics in Kenya has become a business. It's been commercialized, and it's become a business of the few. That's why in my conversation with you tonight, I started by acknowledging the fact that we have got an elite capture of the state. Today, some nondescript individuals are actually the face of leadership in this country, while many of us here who can spend over 2 hours, 2 hours and 45 minutes on space, X-Space, speaking about our country, but we are not involved. They don't care. So long as we are curious onlookers and fence sitters, for them, let Ekuru Aukot, the Western, the Mizanis, and the Obeds make noise on social media. So long as they don't come into our space, hiyo ni shauri yao. I think with those final remarks, I will stop it there. I know this is not a conversation that we can complete today. It should be an ongoing conversation, by the way, until we get it right. Thank you very much, and good night to all.
Thank you so much, Daktari. Very wonderful listening to you. And thank you for offering yourself to, to drive this conversation today. You're welcome to our Sunday schooling again when you have an opportunity. But what you speak to is very true. Those of us who are seated here, and I think I've said this thing severally as well, that we have these conversations, sound very intelligent, but we do not want to offer ourselves for positions of leadership. And as long as we do that, it's going to be difficult to remove the system. We must be the change that we want to see, and we must get in there in the ring. This thing of looking for a Messiah, to try and solve our problems is never going to happen. Thank you so much for your time. We wish you all the best.
And by the way, let me just say one final thing. You see, when I offered myself to run for president of Kenya in 2017, the people who criticized me the most are actually my contemporaries. They're asking me, Ekuru, are you crazy? Are you mad? I mean, you are just a Turkana. How many are you? So for them, it's like I was going to be a president of Turkana. Do you have the money? That's the extent to which our country is actually sliding back. We are not even seeing the fact that as Kenyans, regardless of how small your tribe is or where you come from, the Constitution protects all of us in equal measure. We don't acknowledge that. We look at numbers. We look at, you come from what region. So unfortunately, we are actually the authors of our own misfortune when we decide we are not participating. I think we really need to participate in our governance structure, and that's the only way we can try to change things. It is possible, guys. It's very possible. When we as Third Way Alliance Kenya went to support the Raila Odinga petition against Uhuru Kenyatta, it was actually the audit done by Third Way Alliance Kenya, and I'm not blowing our trumpet here. It was the audit done by Third Way Alliance Kenya that actually, nullified the election, because we fought the old question of transmission of results, while Uhuru Kenyatta and Ruto wanted Raila to go to the counting of votes because they knew they had the numbers, the tribal numbers. But when we attacked the transmission of results, we contributed in our own small way. And of course, I know ODM stole the show. They say that they're the ones who nullified. Fair enough. We made our contribution. But the question I'm putting across is that let's participate, guys. Let's stop this lamentation and complaining. We offer ourselves to be those leaders.
Daktari,
Thank you.
Can you hear me now? Anybody?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, Daktari, before you leave, thank you for being bold enough to seek presidency in this country. I wish that the people that we find on X and or other social media platforms were actually the voters. Unfortunately, voting in this country is done by those people who are the Juakali guys, people in the slums, and the what I can call the less privileged, because they are motivated by money to go and vote. A lot of us on these platforms here can't withstand the rain. We don't vote. If we were to vote online, I think we could have had the president that we wanted. Unfortunately, we can't, and we don't. The Kenyan Constitution, a lot of people say, from a pedestrian's viewpoint, and I believe I am pedestrian in this context, they say it is the perfect constitution if implemented. The question is, if implemented by who? So you find that the executive was given all the powers of implementation. They were given the money and the enforcers. And the only people to check these powers are the other two arms of government, that is the judiciary and parliament. But these arms of government, again, rely on the executive for financing. When you look at voter education, which again can only help the less informed understand that they got power in their hands to get the government they want, you find that, again, voter education requires money. Who has the money? Again, it is the executive. And it is through voter education that we can arrest the Mutuetu syndrome. It is through voter education that we can help our people understand that leaders are not necessarily politicians. Because if you go to the rural area and you say we are waiting for leaders, people think you're waiting for an MCA, you are waiting for
We lost Uncle Fred. Yeah, Uncle Fred, if you can hear us,
Yes.
we can't hear you.
Oh, no.
We lost you.
Can you hear me now?
Uncle Fred,
Can you hear me now?
yes, that's okay now.
Yes, we can.
I was saying, I don't know where, at what point you lost me, but I was saying that voter education requires money. And who has the money again? It is the executive. It is through voter education that we can arrest, yani tuzuie or eliminate this perception kwamba mtu wetu akipewa kazi, therefore sisi pia tumepata. It is through voter education that we can help our people waelewe kwamba leaders are not necessarily watu wa siasa, kwa sababu ukienda mahali useme unangoja viongozi, people will think unangoja MCA, unangoja women rep, unangoja MP, unangoja senator ama governor. So what I'm trying to say is these powers of executing what is in the constitution, bado iko kwa the executive. And the only way we can get to implement the constitution, which was written fairly well, is if that constitution again had gone the extra mile to put the laws in place. Unfortunately, it doesn't do that. The laws that now implement whatever it is that we want, the laws, for example, that have got the final say on chapter 6, where tunasema huyu mtu alipelekwa kotini ama huyu mtu ameiba, hata kama haijakuwa proven beyond reasonable doubt, huyu mtu is of suspicious characters, watu ambao wameua na tunajua kwamba someone actually died in their hands. These people should have not been given a chance, but somehow there was ambiguity that was created by this constitution that is going to take us a long time for us to execute. Thank you.
Thank you, Uncle Fred. I do not know whether, Daktari, you have something to say in regard to that, especially on the part of creating laws, that, deal with ambiguity in law. But I think you put across a very valid point that the power for implementation and, ensuring that the constitution is followed partially still goes back to the executive. So, and that makes things a bit difficult. I don't know what you have to say about that, other than if you have not much, then probably go back to the others on this speaker to hear what they say. I think Daktari cannot hear us. So, Joe, confirm you can hear me?
Yes.
Eli, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, great. Okay, great. So what we do, because we're also running out of time, I'd allow the people on the speaker, Western, I'd give you a minute, 2 minutes or 3 minutes for you to make your final remarks. I'm not so sure, Daktari.
Please, Mr. Obed, may I please be excused now, please?
No problem, Daktari. By all means, thank you very much for spending your time with us. This has really been good.
I can also see my professor Kivuda Kibwana is already joined us, so maybe you can give him a chance to say one or two things on the Constitution.
No problem. We'll have him come.
All right. Good night, everybody. I'm sure we'll see you again soon.
Thank you, Daktari. Thank you so much. So I'll allow Western 5 minutes. Western, I don't know if has he dropped. Oh yeah. Western, I'll allow you 5 minutes to canvass your issue as we look at winding down and closing the space, because we've also taken a lot of time. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Eli. I appreciate the submissions and contributions that so far we've listened to. As I said at the beginning, if we stop dialoguing, then we slide into anarchy. It's important to dialogue. It's one way of having a national conversation about pressing issues bedeviling us. One thing I wish to say is that there is no such a thing as a cookie cutter approach to problems, be it at a personal level, as a societal level, or at a political level. As we have to figure out how to devise our measures, mechanisms, ways and means of surmounting these problems we keep talking about. And my fear is that we tend to think that there is some magic wand. You know, for instance, I ask myself, why would we come up with the word county? What was the problem with the word district? Why would we come up with the deputy president? What was the problem with the vice president? What was it? What was the problem with the province? Those are things that, you know, they look small, almost inconsequential, but they go to the core of a philosophy of a particular country, the uniqueness of a particular country. And it's why I'm referring to this a flawed notion of a cookie cutter approach, that because something worked somewhere, is going to work in our case. It's not true, because there's no one size fits all. Secondly, the Rigathi Gachagua saga keeps me thinking very deeply, keeps me introspecting almost on a daily basis, for the simple reason that if anything was to stand out as far as this constitution is concerned, it was the question, the aspect of probity, of values, of ethics. Those things that you may look at and they look very intangible. There are things you can't see, but like oxygen, you realize how important it is when it's not there. When it's there, you take things for granted. So these values, there are things you don't see. You cannot visualize them. You cannot put a price tag on them, but they're extremely priceless. They're extremely invaluable. And if you are to go to a country and look at this country and say, wow, why does this country look like this? More often than not, it's about those things that are not even spelled in the Constitution, that you don't even find written elsewhere. But people have them, they've internalized them, they've made them part and parcel of their lives, both in private and in public. But in Kenya, I'm afraid it's important to have a constitution. It's important to invoke the rule of law. It's important even to memorize the various articles in the constitution. But fundamentally, is as to whether the spirit of that constitution finds traction in people's hearts and lived experiences. And my fear from the Rigathi Gachagua saga is that we are far away from that. And that's why there's this contradiction of a country that seems to be democratizing, seems to be consolidating. If you look at the number of elections we have had since the advent of the third wave of multi-party politics in the early 90s to date, but we're highly liberal in the sense that we're intolerant towards one another. We're intolerant to diversity. We're intolerant to dissent. We're intolerant to uniqueness and difference. And those aspects are not concomitant with a society that wants to move forward as a collective. Secondly, we differ a lot to our political elite. I'm afraid that's problematic. We differ a lot. We think that so much so that our own collective well-being does not count. Once a political figure is embattled, we think we have the moral duty, we are morally obliged to run to the rescue of that individual. Why? Because of this primordial politics, trying to identify on the basis of fairly anachronistic, basis, from my community, went together in the same school, from my church, those kind of things. They take us nowhere. And therefore, the 2010 Constitution is still far from finding traction, much as it may look lofty. As I learned, I'll put it to, and even if Ekuru is not here, that the Constitution was vulgarized in Naivasha by the political elite. They mutilated it. they bastardized it. So they gave us a very inferior version of what we deserved. Very inferior version. But we had fought. We are almost, falling into the abyss, going by the 2007, 2008 post-election violence. So we're desperate for something. It had been a protracted process, as I said. A lot had been lost. But what we do, as far as changing it is concerned, that is the conundrum. Because again, the very, very individuals who vulgarized it in Naivasha are waiting in the wings. We give them the green light to amend it, and guess what? They will have their way. They will have their way. They will amend those provisions that will satisfy their parochial interests. They will not be interested in the popular aspirations of the people of Kenya. That's my fear. If we were to open that window for amendment, we will again gonna go back to the independence constitution that was arbitrarily amended to the extent that it could not be recognized. So, Eli, Mizani, the real Joe, thanks for the opportunity. We have to dialogue. The constitution is as good as the values, norms, traditions that undergird the society within which this constitution is expected to function. Good night.
Thank you, Weston. Thank you for taking your time being here. I would request that you guys allow me to give Professor Kibwana an opportunity to make a contribution. And where I come from, Professor Kibwana, you're not late. If you found us eating, you don't talk badly about us. Uncle Fred can confirm that. That's what they say. So I give Prof you 5 minutes to make your opening and closing remarks as we look at probably ending the space in the next 15 minutes latest. Thank you very much. Karibu sana, Prof.
Thank you, Eli, Mizani. Thank you, everybody. Sorry, I've been struggling to come into the space because my tablet is not working and I had to borrow some other gadget. And so I say hi to everybody. And because I've come late and I'm coming to the table late, I'll be careful because I'm sure a lot of stuff has been discussed. So I listened to the real Joe at the very end. And what I can say about the making of the Constitution 2010, including its subsequent implementation, is the long struggle of making the Constitution, for me, since 1969, after Oginga Odinga was removed from kind of active political scene. So that making making of the constitution from that time, one can say that the political elite, whether it is the independence constitution, whether it is the 2010 constitution, it is not really their cup of tea. It is not what they feel comfortable implementing, because even the independence constitution as was, with the regionalism, with the division of resources and all that, even that and the fundamental rights and all that, if it had been implemented without the changes that were made, then that, like in Botswana, it could have been a good beginning for us. Even at Lancaster, the three Lancasters, they said that, okay, Kano, which was dominant, said that we are going to accept it for purposes of independence, but subsequently we will change it to be what we want. And if you look at the 2010 constitution as well, there was a lot of resistance. Actually, even towards the very end of making it, still there were the hawks who said that it's not necessary to have even this constitution, but they were told, because of the fights that there'd been 2007-8, if you don't have this constitution, you'll have a revolution. So it was in many ways, even as it is applauded as being one of the most progressive constitutions, those who are in charge actually just wanted to have like a stopgap measure, so to speak. And so when one actually looks at 1964, when the changes of the Independence Constitution began, up to 1991, when we retained multipartyism once more, there were about 30 constitutional changes, which completely destroyed the Independence Constitution. And what is happening from 2010, sorry, just to go back a little, 1964 to 1991, the changes were through constitutional amendments. But now, 2010 onwards, the changes actually, interestingly, to the constitutional and constitutional changes through ordinary legislation. And there is this new thing of changing the constitution through private members' bills. So that actually looks like it's not the state doing it, but it is private members, but they are sponsored to do so. And so we have these unconstitutional changes through legislation, ordinary legislation, and like destroying devolution, bringing all sorts of very funny things. So I think the main issue is to say, even this 20 constitution, how do people protect it so that it is not, first of all, changed recklessly through, going to courts and all that, if, we are contesting any of those, supposed changes, so that at least there is something we can say, you can't do this because the Constitution says no. So that even as they do illiberal things and so on, at least one can say this, like the Gen Zs, you can't do this. You have to be, the Constitution says you have to be transparent, you have to be accountable, you have to do it right. So I think those are the two parallels I wanted to make, actually, to say how the changes happened from 64 to 1991 was through constitutional changes. How they're happening now is through unconstitutional ordinary legislation. And of course, as was rightly pointed out by Real Joe, they now want to change the constitution again because they want to, you can't have a prime minister without changing the constitution. You can't have deputy prime ministers because they want to be able to create positions where they can say, you representative of this ethnic group, you representative of this ethnic group, let's come together and share power now. Somebody will be speaker, somebody of Senate, somebody of the National Assembly, somebody will be prime minister, somebody will be deputy prime minister, two of them, somebody will be a president, a deputy president. So actually, all these fights of from BBI, NADCO, a lot of the real thing is that executive, how it is to be configured to accommodate ethnic barons. And it is true that if you don't have the values which are in the Constitution, so there is a tug of war between what the Constitution says and what people are doing. Like in other places, you go and queue, you don't jump a queue, you don't double overtaking, you do those things that say that this is a humanizing society. And those are things that we are still struggling with. They are in the Constitution, but because there isn't leadership which is nudging us towards, those kinds of values and saying that this is what the law says, this is the rule of law. And even as people say that the deputy president, even when, even if you don't like him, we don't like him because, he's part of the whatever. But it is saying that do whatever you want to do, but following the law. So that for even, people are being evicted, you say follow the law. For, the people being abducted, follow the law. So I think that also for me is an important thing. And so I think my time is up. Maybe the people are not ready for this constitution because the leadership is not taking us that way. But we have to. This is what we have, and we must insist that it must be followed. And when it will be changed, it will be because there is a leadership that changes it positively, like the gender, the 2/3 gender principle and all that, and we do it, the correct way, and hopefully, there's going to be a leadership in the near future which is committed to changing this constitution, because the leaderships that have been there are not leaderships that really, they have consistently not really wanted a more progressive society. And now we're even sliding into, those Kanu days, and we shouldn't do that. And thank you very much, Sore. I was struggling. I'd been told that this is very important X space, and I was struggling to get in, but I'm happy at least I've had this moment to say something. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. At least you've had a bite of what we had. And very good contribution, actually, a very good reflection on what you've put out there, which gives perspective to how it's been. And you quite correctly put it that there's been a tug of war for a long time. And here it's a question of the capacity of the people who are in charge to lead and direct Kenya a certain way. I think what Julius Nyerere did for Tanzania, leading from the front, what we keep talking about Lee Kuan Yew, who guided Singapore to what it is. We keep dreaming and talking about Singapore when it comes to imagination and copying things, but when it comes to doing what they did, we don't. Eli, I take it back to you as we close the space. I think I've said this so many times.
Just give me a second. As one of the drafters of the Constitution, myself, rest assured, Prof, is he still there, Professor Kivuda?
Yeah, he's there.
The late chairman of the Committee of Experts, Kitonga, reassured us as we were drafting this Constitution, it will be self-protecting. Remember, the BBI failed. NATCO is about to fail. And this Cherar guy, is it the guy who is bringing this 7-year term president, MPs, up to the MCS, is going to fail. And I want to reassure you all, sleep well. This constitution is self-protecting. And that is the legacy of the late Gitonga. May his soul rest in peace. So I'm not worried. As one of the drafters, I was the only non-lawyer in a room full of lawyers. And my role was to ensure that we all agreed what Kenyans wanted. And this is exactly what Kenyans wanted. The constitution is cheap. It's not expensive. What is expensive is corruption, 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 and tribalism. Somebody wearing a 10 million shilling watch is in office, public office, for heaven's sake. When people are dying of hunger in northeastern Turkana and even some previously, resourced areas. Anyway, let me not take long, but fellow Kenyans, sleep well. Don't worry about this constitution. It will protect itself. Good night.
Thank you, Araha. Very good. Mizani, if you can hear me.
Sure, Obed, and thank you so much for steering the conversation alongside our good friend, the real Joe. We unfortunately must come to the end of the conversation, so we'll take quick remarks from the already available speakers. I know the data analyst, rather activist, had questioned us and requested to put a quick question to Professor Kivuda. I'll allow him a minute to make the question. If possible, take it, please. Data activist.
Thank you, Eli. And to everyone, I thank you for taking the time. Mine is a quick one to Prof. He holds a very unique position, having been a former governor and him being a law professor. As to those of you who know, those who don't, we usually do county spaces where we look at Office of Control of Budget reports, which we use for civic education in the various counties. So my question to Professor would be, in these reports, usually the Control of Budget gives recommendations of what the county executive needs to do to fix the various situations that result. But we find that the law is not followed. Yeah, they don't follow it, and it's clearly stated which laws that they need to follow when executing certain recommendations that Control of Budget has made. So my question to you would be, how can we, the people, hold the county executive accountable? What action can we take to ensure that the law is followed? Is it doing an audit, a citizen audit, or what exactly can we do? And for context, I can read one of the recommendations that are found in most of the reports, and I quote, "The government requires that salaries be processed through the IPPD system, and the county is advised to fast track the acquisition of unified personnel numbers for their staff. The County Public Service Board should regulate staff engagement on contract and casual workers as provided under Section 74 of the County Governments Act 2012. Further, strict compliance with the approved staff establishment should be maintained." So, Prof, please give us a perspective of you when you were a governor and also as a law professor. Thank you.
Maybe I'll take the final submission from the rest of the speakers before we can actually have Prof to give that as his final kicker. I will allow Wendy. Wendy, you've been a good student today. You have contributed equally. Would love to get your final remarks. Kindly, the mic is yours. A minute and a half.
Hi, thanks, Eli. And I think I wanted to speak to Western and answer, but like Ekuru Aukot already spoke to the ethnic issue. It's about equity. And I think he said it, he articulated it well, that no one is stopping anyone from speaking their ethnic language. It's more about equity. So how do we include small communities? And so Western, again, there's the need to recognize, as I said, to recognize ethnicity, but not for grounded. So you'd mentioned South Africa. And I think as a national leader speaking your ethnic language, maybe you should reconsider that. But anyway, about people keep saying we don't have a culture and what are our values. I think going back to our ancestors, the Mau, I think I just finished reading A Grain of It. Please don't tell my mom because I was supposed to read it years ago. But then, so we are the land of free men and women. Of course, me being a feminist scholar, we're the land of free men and women. And our cries for freedom sent shivers even to a small island in Bioko, now Equatorial Guinea. And so I think that has remained consistent even with the Gen Z movement now. Our cries for freedom. We are the land of the free. And and perhaps I should land at that because and maybe as I land again, I'll proudly say I was Professor Migai's student. Okay, now I land. Bye.
You never cease to amaze us. I expected you'd say you were a student to Professor Kivuta here, but Professor Migai is equally a good professor of the law. Let's get any final remarks from I'm convoluted here. Uncle Fred Obachi Machoka, thank you for making time to be here. As a very veteran broadcaster, we celebrate you. But as you questioned about who gets to decide how our constitution is implemented, you also have your own voice to add. You've questioned why we have a lot of young people advocating on X and they never get to vote. How do we translate this X energy to the X on the ballot? Obachi.
I think this is a result of frustration, because when I look at I'm slightly old, so I've seen I've watched the political space a while. I've watched the political space when Honorable Ruto and the team were talking about being vijana wa kidijitali. And then I've seen them grow old, and then we have had people like Babu Owino and people like Ndindi Nyoro, young people coming in, and so on and so forth. I think the voter is frustrated because every time they bring in young tax, so to speak, to represent them in parliament, where people assume that is where there is leadership, Like I said, to a pedestrian thinker or the guy in the streets, a leader ni mwanasiasa. Then you find that the people who are voted in as young people who are supposed to think independently and probably not spring this tribal card end up being assimilated into the system. I don't know, Kibuda Kibwana might help us. What happens in that parliament is like there is a curse that anybody who gets to parliament stops thinking. So you find that once these people have been absorbed into that same status quo, then people feel like we are not having any changes. So what I can only encourage people to do is that within your small space, whether it is you and your wife and children, or you and your mother, or you and your husband, let there be a conversation about how we can change Kenya so that we become like few clusters. And when all these clusters get to combine and we are thinking the same way, probably we can make changes. Otherwise, if we go a bit global, we may never change anything. We are being frustrated, and some of us in our small space, we try and say what we think people should do. And the only keyword here is integrity. That do what you think should be done within your space without anybody looking and without you demanding to be applauded for doing the right thing. I tell people, do good for no good reason. That's my mantra on air. But I want that teacher to also teach his children that it is good to do good. And it is even better to be seen to be doing good, even if you don't get applauded for it. Thank you.
You know, Uncle Fred, I would have released you because of age, but I realize you also love life. When are you inviting us to the ranch? Because how much is your capacity?
Our capacity is up to about 1,500. We can actually have
Awesome.
many people at the
You know
ranch.
why I
Yes.
asked you that? I will ask Obeds to tell you why I asked you that. Obeds, please, now shine and show you know how to speak.
You're being a bully, but Uncle, I went to school with your son and we played together. He was our striker for a long time. He's invited me a lot of times. It's me who's failed to come. So now, Eli, you happy I've revealed the truth?
Tell Uncle about the upcoming event because we might just want to switch.
Well, we're having a conference. We're looking at having a conference on in the month of March next year. We did one this year, but we want to do one that's different. It's not your ordinary kind of conference that we talk about. We want to use something called open space technology, where you have kind of like an X space in the open where you get to see people physically. And you have people sitting in different areas, different conversations going on, and you're able to move within from one point to another, depending on the conversation that's being held. Then people can vote on what they agree. And then we can see how we put traction to that, because we want to come up with something that is tangible and can be followed. I'm sure it's nothing different, but want to do it differently than what other people have done. The concept paper is out, and you can check our contacts on mizani254.org, our website, at the bottom, how to contact us. And we'll be happy. We're looking for people to collaborate with so that we make this a reality, and we'll be happy to engage. Mizani, I think I've done that.
Awesome. And just one thing that was left out, we are hosting an event, and that is the conference. The theme is purpose-driven leadership. And we are not just doing it on X, Uncle Fred. And therefore, if we can have a sideline conversation, I will be happy to see if we will come to the ranch. Maybe we can eat more ostrich. Thank you for being here. We appreciate you.
Karibu, thank you.
Asante sana. Now, let's move to the next final speaker. And Western, we will give you one more chance to make your really final remarks and overview of the conversation we had. Please.
Thank you, Eli. Eli, Wendy, probably she doesn't get me. Wendy, I'm averse to ethnic balkanization, very, very much so. And therefore, what I'm saying is I'm inviting the Kenyan political elite and you and me and everybody else not to be ashamed of who we are. It's not the diversity of Kenya that renders Kenya politically unstable. It is the political elite who, instead of harnessing the diversity of the country, elects to exploit it for parochial power and economic ends. So if you teach people their mother tongue, their local languages, you're not balkanizing the society. The Japanese speak Japanese. Koreans speak their language. You can go on and on. In China, they speak their languages. That doesn't make them any less globally competitive. So you can, borrow selectively from elsewhere, but you do not borrow while you look down upon what is yours, which is what we do. So Wendy, Peter Eke, a Nigerian social scientist, in an article written way back in 1975, you can look for it, Colonialism and the Two Publics, argues that one of our enduring challenges in Africa is that we become extremely nervous and jittery every other time we find falling short of the so-called international standards. You find in most African universities, they will do things, and when you ask them, why do you do these things? The answer would be, these things are being done in Harvard, in Oxford. There's no other justification. And you can see it even amongst our political elite. Why do you introduce an ID card that expires? It's done in Uganda, it's done elsewhere. We don't want a society like that. We must have justification for the things we do, because those things matter. Those things, we understand why we're doing them, not because somebody else is doing them. And therefore, heritage is important. Our cultures are important. Our languages are important. Our history is important. So that's the point I'm making. Eli, Mizani, and Obet, sincere appreciation once more. Let's keep talking. Talking, especially when you talk back to power. Power that is subverting the rule of law is an act of subversion. And that's why autocratic regimes proscribe freedom of speech, freedom of conscience, and many other civil liberties, because they don't want being talked back to. So we must continue talking. It's not doing nothing. It's where we begin by framing, our thoughts and our roadmap on what to do vis-a-vis our challenges. So it's not being cynical, as Ekuru would put it. I would celebrate. If things are working, I celebrate. But if things are not working and I celebrate, that's delusional. That's being caught up in a cloud cuckoo land. We don't do that. In scholarship, we stick to facts. And through facts, then we can find a resolution to our challenges. Thank you so much. We'll keep talking. Pleasure. Good night.
Good night to you, Western Shilaho. I love the fact that there was something about cuckoo, and I was here about to start singing "Going Cuckoo." I remembered I eat that a lot in my meals. That activist had a question for Professor Kivuta Kibwana. Being a good professor, I'll give him 3 minutes probably to respond to the issue of holding the counties accountable when it comes to management of resources. Professor, your timer starts now.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mizani, Obed, and Eli, and for all colleagues here. Let me very quickly say, how come like Uncle Fred, and that's a big name in our country, when he says, what happens when people go into parliament, they go, through parties of other people, because the parties are owned. And so you are invited. And when you arrive there, you do what those who have been there do. And that is why even people are very positive. Whether it was Orengo, it was Anyang Nyong, initially they were thrown out they were thrown out of the political party, which belonged to somebody else. So, and that begs the question: when are we going to have actually what is truly a progressive, political representation? To some extent, like the way there is in South Africa, Kinamalema, I don't know about Umkhonto wa Sizwe, that kind of initially NC, initially, TANU, CCM. So that's really a question, that needs to be answered. And like during 1992, 1997, the opposition was fragmented and it got defeated by a minority of the votes that Moi got. So in the same way, if all these people, good people, are in next spaces who are crying for change of their country, the young people got killed, abducted, and all that. If this doesn't translate into a progressive movement so that there is a party or a coalition of parties that Kenyans can say, yes, this is now what we have been waiting for. Again, this will be wasted and we will do other XX spaces, maybe some other time after 2027. I think maybe when you discuss purpose-driven leadership in Machoka's ranch, Uncle Machoka's Fred's ranch, one thing that needs to be focused on is police reforms. Because actually, when the political elite discover that they're in a corner, they recourse to the police and they say we are going to increase the price, the salaries, and all that kind of stuff. And I think it's good that people read a novel called Glory by No Violet Bulawayo. In that novel, actually, change begins to happen when the police say they're tired of killing people. They don't remember why they're killing them, killing relatives, killing whatever. So maybe that's something that could be discussed in that particular place. And very quickly, about X-Energy becoming X-Ballot. In the last elections, 8 million young people who were registered didn't vote. And about 3.3 or 4 million had not even registered when they're 18, even registered IDs. So, and now by 2027, another Gen Zs who are under 18 are going to be, 18 plus. So you're talking about 16 million young people. And if those young people, don't translate, their numbers into getting IDs, those who don't have, registering to vote, going to vote, talking to people to tell them that now, we must vote, we must really change, get people who are going to enforce this constitution, including ourselves, the young people. Then again, we are staring at, a dark future. And I liked what Uncle Fred said about wherever you are, please organize there, like micro organizing for change. So that micro organizing eventually and soon is translated into macro organizing through that progressive movement that one talked about. And the languages of people are very important. People's cultures are very important, and maybe even the way to defeat this negative ethnicity is through talking, like what Ango Machoka in the place where he works, where they have those stations, talking to people in their languages to tell them that don't keep on being cheated by these so-called kingpins and so on, who don't care about you but cheat you. They are caring about you. Like Gugi writes, in Kikuyu, and many people who read him who can't read English or Swahili, are able to understand, all the issues about how change is required to happen. So I think we need to be careful about bastardizing this, to say that this promotes negative ethnicity. It's not them. It is the political people who thrive on that. And finally, the question of how come all these things, data activists and how come all these recommendations don't see the light of day and they are disobeyed? And it is from the county assembly is supposed to be the first instance of correcting, holding accountable the county governments, the county executive. Then you go to Senate. Then you go to Auditor, General. Then there is also a controller of budget, and all those people, and they say which do this because this law you have not done it. But there is general impunity. So when there's general impunity, and when these people know that they can compromise, people can, take them to court and stuff, then, some of these things will continue. But I like the question of citizen audit is so critical, because we tried it in Makwen, where from the village, people elected, and there was a people's government, which would, be in charge of their projects. You couldn't be paid if they don't say yes. And, we were getting to the stage of even summarizing those auditors' reports and stuff, and then getting them to ask people, how come, you are not doing this and you're supposed to do it? So I really emphasize, apart from this layer of saying that there should be accountability as demanded by those institutions of government, independent institutions, but the citizen audit is so critical, because that is how Article 1 of the Constitution is enforced. And I think there's going to be a huge battle between the people and the leadership who want to subvert, the livelihoods of people. And so I really encourage that activists, encourage all the people who are going that route to really continue to build, something for the 1450 counties, so that those counties, people know that they can't do monkey business and get away from it. Thank you very much, and good night. And I wish I was here at the beginning. This is really great. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Kivuta. And I saw you signed up for a new job. You'll be giving lectures. So if you guys are planning to follow some law lectures, just hit up on Prof. He might be your next mwalimu. Mwalimu, there's a student here who has refused to go home. Na tumemalizana na school fees yake. Wendy, what is this you need to air out before we call it a night?
Thanks, Eli. I think as a student, maybe I just want Western to expound. Who is stopping you from speaking your language? Because you seem to be conflating issues here. We are very proud of our language and our culture, but who is stopping us from speaking our language? And please, relate that to cohesion, because maybe then I will be able to understand. Thanks.
All right, I will call that a rhetoric one.
For Wendy and Western to finish this business.
You know, the lovely part about this, people have been requesting for their own spaces, and who are we? We offer those, right? So, unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, we are late into the night. We realize you had a long holiday today if you're in Kenya. Unfortunately, Tuesday means it's back to work, and we have to let you go to take some rest before you resume your daily duties. Having said that, I will welcome the real Joe to make his final remarks, who was our co-host, followed by Obeds, and then any final announcements. The real Joe, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Eli and Obeds. We've had a very good conversation. I actually love the idea of hosting the conference at the ranch. I'm just gonna hold my horses as I also sharpen my teeth in case we have ostrich to eat on that particular day. So I'm looking forward to that. But anyway, one thing I would like to say is, for me, I have a few issues. I have a few problems with our constitution on a few issues, and I'm glad Prof is still here. He can be able to hear some of these issues that I have. Article 145 was given to us in this constitution to be able to, whenever we lose confidence with the president, then he can be impeached. And this article gives that to the members of parliament. And that's where I have the problem. This article clearly states the grounds in which impeachment an impeachment motion can be brought to parliament: gross violation of our constitution, misconduct, and of course, if the president is believed to have contravened both international law and our laws locally. So I have a problem with, first of all, who determines this gross violation of our constitution? Because as I understand that article, it is supposed to be a member of parliament who brings that motion. So who determines that? I have that question. Number two, also, in yesterday's space, I had this problem with our political system, whereby the president of the Republic of Kenya is still the party leader, UDA. And therefore, how then would members of parliament under UDA be able to exercise Article 94 and 95, checking the president and reviewing the conduct of the president? How is that possible if you have your party leader as the president, your party leader, who can also whip you at the party level, again, is the same person you're supposed to review the conduct for? I have a problem again when it comes to Article 119. It gives us a right to petition Parliament. And I would love to know if the people, because right now in the current political temperatures, the people have been talking about kufa makanga, kufa dereva. With Article 119, is it then possible? Because I've also seen online people ask, I mean, can we have one member of parliament just table that motion of impeachment? Is it possible that we, the people, can petition parliament to table a motion of impeachment against the president? These are some of the things that I'm conflicted about our constitution. And again, finally, Professor Migai talked about power dynamics. And I'm one of those people who believe power is balanced by power. For me, for this instance, for me, state power against the sovereign power of the people. So state power should be balanced by the sovereign power of the people. I got very concerned when I heard Dr. Ekuru say that Article 1 it is difficult to bring Article 1 to life. And he tried to insinuate about Article 108 in terms of calling the president, the members of parliament, and things like that. I am one person who has believed that Article 1 stands on its own and it is not dependent on Article 108, because it therefore means balancing the state power with the sovereign power of the people. I wish Dr. Aukot was here, but he will play the recording and be able to task him to answer these questions for me later on. But as I yield, the true cost of our constitution for me is not actually the cost of administration. I see it differently. Lack of service in terms of roads, healthcare. We have a new social health authority coming in with a rumor. I'll say a rumor, with a rumor that it is supposed to bring to life Article 43, our socioeconomic rights. Yet we now have, with this process coming in place, we have people who are unable to access healthcare directly against the same article they're claiming to bring to life. These are some of the things that we have as a problem in our constitution, and that is the true cost of our constitution for me. The true cost, again, for me, is lack of development. When we don't have development, and in fact, another cost for me is other than corruption, and we talk about 680 billion a day and things like a year in loss to corruption, roughly 2 billion a day. Other than that, for me, again, the true cost of our constitution is when we have leadership that does not understand what it means to work for the people. That is the true cost for me, because if our leaders would understand that, then we would not have problems even with the cost of administration and things like that. So as I land, I also want to encourage us, be the leader you wish you had. That is my encouragement to you. Good night. And I appreciate all of you who took your time to join our space today. And we've had a great conversation. I'm going to throw it back to you, Eli, so that we can conclude the space. Thank you very much. And I hope we get to eat the ostrich at the ranch. I'm sharpening my teeth, Eli. Thank you.
Thank you, the real Joe. I want to thank everyone who's taken their time to be here. It's really an honor to spend such a long time listening to us have this conversation. For those who are not able to come to the speaker and be able to give your contributions, and those who made your contributions on by comments, we are grateful for taking your time, because it also added value to this conversation. Auntie Rosemary, nice to see you. It's really been good. And I think, without belaboring the point, the reality that we face in this country is that we have very good. Kenya does not have a lack of laws. I think we are over legislated, if I may say that. The problem has always been having people who have fidelity to the law and who have the intention and desire to implement it. And partly because they're beholden to the fact that it's always about power and being able to control and have resources. I think what Professor Kagwanja calls the Happy Valley problem. So if we Kenyans, as we have we have an opportunity after every 5 years to vet these people. The problem is we've always appointed to leadership positions people who do not have the capacity or wherewithal to do that which is supposed to be done. And the reason is we are looking at people who have numbers in terms of they speak our language, also probably they talk like me, they do things like me, and because of that we're going to support them, or we do it out of pity. We are looking at a situation right now where the impeachment process for the DP hasn't been properly followed, and all of a sudden that we've whipped emotions in terms of tribalism. We have people now saying, I'm proper mountain person. We are being targeted, and it's unfortunate that's the case because now we're going back to our tribal cocoons. Maybe sympathy votes. If this guy is gotten off the hook by stay orders from the court, what do you expect? The political dynamic trumps over the constitution, which is really not how it should be. Thank you very much for your time. We Kenyans know what is our problem. We just never want to take the medicine. And until the day we do so, we'll keep having the same problem and we repeat this. But I repeat again, let's all go out there. Let's not look for a savior to solve our problem. We must all be hands on deck. Everybody has to participate in our different ways. We have different abilities and capacities. Let us contribute in what we have. If I'm able to read, I read to the people. If I'm able to marshal people together, let me do that. We cannot all assume that we can go to the streets and do the same thing. Everybody has a role to play, but let's not look for a messiah, because the problem that we find ourselves in, because the colonial system appointed political kingpins from different tribes and made them the barons that they are today. And that's where we find ourselves. Unless we stop waiting for a messiah and all of us go out there and do the right thing, we'll be here talking and talking and talking. Thank you very much. Eli, back to you, and let's end the space.
Thank you very much, Obed, and the rest of the team. Indeed, it has been a long one, but I must say very fruitful. I want to take the opportunity to personally thank our guest speakers, Dr. Weston Shilaho, Senior Lecturer, International Relations, that is at the University of Witwatersrand. In English, that is Whitewater Beach, right? In Johannesburg. And Dr.
Eli, Witwatersrand.
Yes.
Witwatersrand.
Yeah, you know, that's Afrikaans, and I'm speaking in Netherlands or Dutch, so it's the same thing. You say wit, we say it wit. But thank you very much. I appreciate you, and we do appreciate for you connecting with us on the space. Dr. Ekuru Aukot, that is the party leader, Third Way Alliance Kenya in absentia. We want to thank him for being here. And Professor Migaya Cage, Professor of Law, University of Nairobi, as always, a pleasure having him and the rest of the team here. And all of the speakers that made it to the platform tonight, we do appreciate you, and we don't take it for granted that you actually gave us time, ears, and even your bandwidth to share this very interesting conversation on the making of the Kenya Constitution 2010. Our conversation continues every single Sunday on the Sunday Schooling, and this Sunday we turn it a little bit lower from the very political conversation to much more about the church. And what are we talking about the church? That is the corporate church. We are told it's ISO certified, but we will be discussing the drunken master. Let's talk about that this coming Sunday. My name is Lukiani Eli on behalf of Mizani 254. I want to wish you the very best. And right here in Mizani, where the scales of balance are restored and meaningful conversation thrive, have yourselves a great evening.